I'm happy to be here, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what happened these 2 days. We had our roundtable in Brisbane. I'm trying to remember where I've been. In Brisbane, and then I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about what we do at UCSD combined with the research. I've been researching this topic for 11 years now, and have published quite a bit in this area. And so, I practice, obviously I'm a practitioner at UCSD, but a lot of that is based on theory. And so I'm going to focus my points when I get to my work specifically on what Macquarie has expressed interest in, which is student engagement, although I will be talking about other things as well. But even though Macquarie is particularly interested in student engagement, I'm hearing inklings of that throughout Australia, and I know that's a new thing for Australia, that students typically haven't been engaged in academic integrity, and I would advocate for that change. And so hopefully we'll generate some discussion around that. So the roundtable, as Sadia mentioned, was 2 days last week, and we had lots of presentations sharing best practices. So last year when we had the roundtable, it was really about the policy analysis and what to make of it. And this year it was about the institutions identified as having exemplary policies telling us what it looks like in practice, rather than just looking on it on paper. So here's who was there. Obviously USA, Griffith, and QIBT, the partners, and then members from the project reference group, which included other Australian universities, and Erica from the UK and myself, and then some invited participants who shared with us some information that we needed or were just there to listen to what we were sharing. And the aims were really an opportunity for public and private providers to collaborate. As Sadia mentioned, the first project, Academic Integrity Standards, was focused on the public universities, and this one is focused on all higher education providers. And we were sharing implementation details of exemplary academic integrity policies and exploring ways to extend best practice for those three identified groups that Sadia mentioned: the AAL students, the educationally less prepared students, and the HDR students. And this is what we found. We had five main themes come out of our 2-day discussion, and that's what I'm going to share with you today. So the first one is academic integrity champions. We talked about this quite a lot, actually, because, policies are fantastic, but if they're not implemented, then they're just pieces of paper lying around campus. And we all know that we have tons of policies on our campuses, and a lot of them just sit around and don't do much. And with integrity, it's really important that not only does the policy have champions, but the innovation, the idea of academic integrity itself needs champions. You would think so, right? You would think that, why would integrity need champions? But unfortunately, in today's society, it does need champions. And I think it has always needed champions, because sometimes integrity gets in the way of other things we want in life, like money or promotions or a grade on an assignment. And so those kinds of things have to be promoted. And so we need what we're calling academic integrity champions. And this is actually the words that we have here came up over our 2 days, but they're from some work that I've done. It was a conference paper that I did in 2008. It was really from my dissertation research. So there's all sorts of academic integrity champions. The first kind is the activator, and that's really the person on campus that sounds the alarm and says, hey, we've got a cheating problem on this campus, and we need to do something about it. Or we've got a plagiarism problem, or whatever the case may be. Somebody who's brave enough to stand up and say, we need to do something about this. Or if there's not a problem, integrity is important. We need to be teaching integrity and ethics to our students. Maybe that's the sounding of the alarm. Basically breaking the silence on this issue. And there is a lot of silence around this because people are embarrassed about it. They don't want to talk about it. They want to pretend that it's not an issue. And then there's the management champion, and that's highlighted in bold and different color because that's extremely important. Because you can't do any of this without resources. And the management champion is really the person who holds the purse strings, who has the ability, the authority, and the money to direct it towards this issue, right? Because there's always competing issues on campuses. We actually think integrity goes with every other issue that's on campus, whether it's internationalization or whether it's improving the rankings of the institution. Integrity is paramount to all of those. But in most people's eyes, there are issues that all conflict, and we have to spend money, and where do we decide to spend our money on? So you really need a management champion. The product champion is obviously also important. That person is committed to the innovation and sells the idea. And again, that could be several people, and it most likely has to be several people. And I think about the teaching staff who go out and they sell the idea to their colleagues in their department. So they're the people that say, no, you should follow policy. You should report students when you see plagiarism or cheating, because that helps us create a culture of academic integrity. So those are the product champions that are really necessary. And then the agents of diffusion are really the ones who move the innovation from idea to active implementation. So they are the teaching staff who do talk about academic integrity in their class, who teach students or refer students somewhere to learn about citation, who do act on cheating or plagiarism when they see it and not just ignore it. They are also the students who might say to another student, no, I'm not going to let you cheat off me on this exam. Professor, I have to let you know that there were people cheating in your last exam. So those are the people that we really need. Teaching staff and students are really the people on the ground when it comes to this topic. If they're not doing anything, then that policy is not going to do anything. They're at the front of the line. So this came up as extremely important for us in our roundtable. Academic integrity education obviously was also very important. And we talked about those English EAL students and the educationally less prepared students and the HDR students. But really when it comes down to it, we talked about how we need inclusive education. We need to not make assumptions that one group of student knows more or less than another group of students. And it seems to be a big mistake to assume that our domestic students are also knowledgeable about academic integrity and rules of citation, and all our international students are not. It's a very dangerous assumption, because then you're denying our domestic students knowledge and education and information that they need, and maybe you're making it seem like the international students aren't as good as. And really what I have found, and it sounds like it's the same that came up in the roundtable in Australia, is that our domestic students are just as ignorant. The survey that the project did, in the survey the students claim that they know what it is, but you know, just because they claim they know doesn't mean they actually do. And that's what I found in the United States. The students say all the time, oh yeah, I can avoid a breach. But that's just because they see people that breach the policy as cheaters, and they don't identify themselves as cheaters, therefore they will not breach the policy. That doesn't mean they actually know anything about it. And we have to recognize the diversity in our domestic students. We have domestic students, I'm sure you do too, that are homeschooled. Are they really going to have been taught all the finer points of exam integrity and citation and attribution? I know there's a big difference between our students who have gone to public schools and those that have gone to private schools. They might have gotten different education, rich districts versus poor districts. So there's a lot of variety there. So we talked about just having better, more education that's inclusive, that helps everybody, and doesn't need to be overly complicated, regardless of what level it's for. But you also have to recognize that there's diversity in disciplines. So I'm doing a project right now with some biologists looking at scientific writing issues, and whether an academic integrity intervention versus a writing intervention, whether either of those will actually reduce writing problems. And what I learned through that is biologists actually don't use quotation marks, in America anyways. They don't cite, they cite, but they're supposed to paraphrase and synthesize and understand everything to the point where they do no direct quotations. So that's very different than in the social sciences and in education, where we quote people, right? So there's differences there. So our education does have to recognize the diversity of disciplines and of staff and students, and also the modes of assessment. And so for HDR students, for example, we have to talk not just about cheating on exams or plagiarizing on this term paper, but actual research misconduct and research integrity. So you cannot fabricate data in your lab, for example, So we do have to, so we can have inclusive education but also recognize diversity. And of course then we need resourcing. So that came out time and time again. Well, all that's great, but if you don't have the resources to do it, can't do it. So there needs to be structures, systems, and people to support broad education. And we have to compensate workload issues for those who are doing it. If it's not their only job to do academic integrity like it is for me, we have to make sure that they're compensated for that in terms of workload time, but also in terms of rewards, promotion, that type of thing. Decision making. This was a clear theme for us. There has to be obviously clear procedures and processes for determining outcomes for academic integrity breaches. That seems pretty sensical. But also there has to be people with authority to make a decision. And we did debate whether it should be individuals making decisions or teams of people making decisions. So, for example, does the case get referred to one academic dean, for example, or an academic integrity officer who decides yes or no the student breached the policy, or does it go to a team of people who make that decision? So we had a debate about that, but what's most important is somebody has the authority to make some decisions, that there's aids to the process. So especially if it is individuals making decisions, that they have aids so that there's fairness and consistency, so that a student who plagiarizes in an English class doesn't get a different penalty than a student who plagiarizes in a music class. That would not be fair. So we want to make sure that just if people are individuals and they have the authority, that they're not making them in a vacuum. And they have easy links to resources. And that also means then professional development and mentoring for those decision makers, training them when they start, enabling them to consult with each other, having collaboration tools, and again, recognition of workload. And a fourth theme was knowledge management. So there are some campuses, institutions that don't have a centralized system for record keeping, and that is extremely important. Now, if you're a big university, 28,000 students, you need a pretty sophisticated system probably to keep track of these things. If you're a campus of 1,000 students, you probably just need an Excel sheet or maybe, Microsoft Access. It doesn't have to be something that costs any money, but there should be a centralized system for record keeping. This is very important to keep track of the breach data. The academic integrity education. So if there's an educational response to a plagiarism incident, you want to keep track of that because then if that student's reported again, you want to be able to say, oh gosh, this student was reported a second time even though they've already been through our educational process. I got to have a conversation with the student about that, or I've got to look what's wrong with our educational process. The demographics. Now, this is very touchy. It is helpful to know the demographics of those who have breached the policy, but we must always remember that these are demographics of people who have been reported for breaching the policy. They're not the demographics of people who have breached the policy, right? Because not all students who breach the policy get reported. So we can't say, if our demographics of our data show that 20% of the students reported for cheating are international students, we can't say 20% of the students who cheat are international. Does that make sense? So be very careful about that, and I remind people this again and again. It's the same as using self-reported data. You can't say, if 42% say they cheat once a year, we can't say that 42% of students cheat once a year, okay? So it's demographics about who's reported for cheating. Therefore, it might not tell you who is cheating more or plagiarizing more. It may tell you who gets reported more, which may indicate that they're breaching the policy more. It may indicate there's something else going on. Maybe there's a bias in that department against a certain group of students. Maybe it's easier to catch plagiarism with EAL students because the difference in voice is much easier to detect. There's all sorts of reasons. Confidentiality, you want a centralized system so that you can track students who may be reported multiple times, but it's kept confidential to only people in a need-to-know type of basis. And so I've talked a lot about what's the purpose of it. You can improve process. So if time and time again this first year class keeps having to report students, maybe there's something that can be done in the to fix the assignments. Maybe the process takes too long, and so you know that from keeping the data. Procedural fairness. Again, are students in the English department getting the same penalties as students in the biology department? Transparency. You can publicize this data. You wouldn't publicize it with student names attached to it, of course, but you can say, 2% of the student body was reported for cheating and plagiarism, 56% were suspended, or whatever the data is. And again, improving the student experience. If there is a repeated problem in certain classes, it might be helpful to address that. And finally, our fifth theme was evaluation, and we have more questions here than answers. And they're hard. How do we know that what we're doing is having an impact on the culture of integrity in our institutions? This is kind of the stuff that I've been studying for 11 years. And really what we need to be doing is baseline measurements, right? So before we start a massive project on academic integrity, we should be doing a baseline measure. And unfortunately, a lot of times that's going to be baseline measures of self-reported, self-reports from students about what they're doing, what their understanding of the policy is, what their understanding of academic integrity is, the self-reports from your teaching staff, how often do they detect breaches, how often do they report them, do they talk about academic integrity. Then you do your interventions, and then you survey again, do you see if there's any changes in attitudes and values, and self-reported behaviors. Again, you're not getting at the real behaviors with those surveys. Real behaviors are obviously harder to get at, and there's ways that you can do them. We're doing, I've got several studies going at UCSD where we're doing, looking at actual behaviors before and after interventions. And so that really needs to be done. And looking at the data to say, do we have a problem? Do we have a problem where nobody in chemistry is getting reported? Now, from my experience, it doesn't mean that chemistry students aren't breaching the policy. It usually means that the chemistry teaching staff are not reporting them for some reason. So what do we need to do to get those teaching staff on board? Why is it that they're not contributing to this movement of trying to change the culture on campus? And our students engaged in the process. And we talked a lot about the benefits of peer-to-peer mentoring, not just for students, but teaching staff to teaching staff. It's a lot better for a history lecturer to talk to the other history lecturers about the benefits of academic integrity and upholding academic integrity than it is for me to tell history lecturers that a lot of the time. So that gets back to the champions as well. So this is what we hope to deliver by the end of this project, which I think the deliverables have to be in August. So we, Sadi already mentioned, develop a generic online academic integrity policy template, but what she didn't mention was that we want it to be in plain English. That it'll be, and that we'll consult with IELTS? However you pronounce that, IELTS. I've learned a lot of acronyms the last few days. We talked about looking at YouTube. Well, first we talked about creating videos, like the peer-to-peer videos, student to student, staff to staff, but then we thought, well, there's probably a lot already out there, so maybe first we need to just collate what's already out there, create an academic integrity YouTube channel, and then look to see if there's any that are missing that need to be done, in particular case studies. So the standards project already produced a lot of case studies, but they're all text-based, and wouldn't it be good to have some that are video-based, where the people are actually acting out the case rather than you having to read the case. Produce collate materials for peer-to-peer mentoring. We talked about how there's already peer ambassadors or buddies, or every institution calls them different things, but training them to talk to students about academic integrity. So we could create materials for that. Develop learning materials to articulate the difference between inclusion and collaboration. This, is a key, common area of confusion for students, and we felt like if we were going to try and address one, that would be a good one to try and address. So I'm pitching something on a website that's almost like a pathway. They could, if I did this, what would happen? And it would lead to the next step. And so we were talking about developing those things. Identifying good academic integrity resources for HDR students we talked about, and then developing a draft of HDR academic integrity policy and practice guidelines for the DDOGs. I want to be a member of the DDOGs. I think that's an awesome name. Deans and Directors of Graduate Studies. Because they're the ones that could disseminate that amongst the HDR folks. So those are, I don't think we'll get all these done, but this was already a narrowed down list from what we talked about at the roundtable. So just to summarize, we aim to address the needs of all higher education providers and look at issues of diversity, scope, and timing and resources. I actually am the director of an academic integrity office. It's about one of 6 in North America. It's not very common to have an entire office that all we get to do is this. So I'm quite fortunate, actually. Those are a lot of my student volunteers that work with me. And our mission is to promote and support a culture of academic integrity in order to reinforce quality teaching and learning at UC San Diego. So it's not just about having a culture, but it's about supporting or reinforcing quality teaching and learning. That may not sound like such a big deal here because I've noticed in Australia you do a much better job than we do at connecting academic integrity to assessment and quality. In the States, not so much. It's about students behaving badly. It's a student conduct issue and nothing else. And hence all of my work trying to convince people that it's not that. So this is kind of a big deal in the States. That's just our website. So we do have a pretty thorough website. It needs a revamping. Who's got the time? But it's got resources for students and faculty on there. And you're welcome to go there. You don't have to go by that URL. The simple URL, I can write it up here, is just academicintegrity.ucsd.edu. So it's real simple. And there's myself, who's I'm full-time, the director. There's Susan, a.k.a. office mom is what the students call her, but she's the only other full-time staff in my office. She's our program assistant, but kind of our office manager. And then I have somebody who teaches the seminar, academic integrity seminar for me, which I'll tell you about. Zarina used to be a peer educator with my office, has graduated, is working in the university, and has still continued to volunteer with my office. She's a really important part of my team. And then I have peer educators and student workers who right now are all undergrads, but I have had grad students as well. And student workers are paid to do administrative stuff. The peer educators are all volunteers, and I'll tell you more about them. So how do we promote and support a culture of academic integrity? Well, first it's important to have a fair and transparent policy and process, obviously, right? So some examples, cases are to be resolved within 12 business days so they don't drag on. No one staff member has authority to decide the case, which I do think is important for fairness. Policy and process are public and translated into readable documents and web pages, which I showed you. What I forgot to put up there was about the transparent thing. I did hint at it earlier. We have sanctioning or penalty guidelines, and they're up on the website. Students can look at them. Anybody can look at them. It's not a secret about what kind of breach leads to what kind of penalty. And then we do produce annual reports with statistics and data. You know, percentage of the students reported, what percentage fall into certain grade brackets, what percentage are international students, what percentage are male or female, and all this kind of stuff. What departments are they reported from? So that's all part of that. If the integrity office or the integrity engine isn't transparent, then I think we have a problem, right? And people aren't going to buy that. Nothing goes against your attempt to create a culture of integrity more than hypocrisy, right? So I think that's really important. The second thing is to create structures to support the teaching staff. Training workshops so we do training workshops for the teaching staff. We have participated in creating suitable final exam spaces. So I don't know about here, but we have a lot of classrooms that are in these, 1970s classrooms with the flip-up desks, and students are packed in like sardines. So they sit next to each other like this close. Sorry, videographer. They sit next to each other this close, and then they're expected not to be able to, look on each other's, don't look on his exam paper. It's like, it's right there. How can I not look at it, right? That's unfair. And, we kind of treat students like, cows going into slaughter in many ways. So but the problem is there's nowhere else. But there are some universities in North America who do this, and I'm not sure about here, but open up the gymnasiums for final exam time. It's very simple, but we weren't doing it. Yeah, we weren't doing it. And so faculty teaching staff are falling all over themselves in thanks to my office and the other people who have participated in this. That engenders support for the policy and the process, right? So they know that they're being helped. They will, in turn, help the university. Communication to department chairs. So this goes to the fact that if an instructor has to report cheating, their teaching evaluations might be affected. right? By at least the student who's reported, maybe by some of their friends, and for our sessional faculty who might have to get invited back every term to teach, that can be detrimental. So we are always communicating to department chairs saying, hey, just let you know, these faculty had to report cheating this term. You know, it might affect their teaching evaluations. Please don't, you know, ding them for it. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're abiding by their professional integrity. Ensuring classroom spaces, again, those classrooms, faculty might see 2 students cheating but then can't identify who they are because at the end of the exam there's 400 people rushing at them. So we went around and made sure all those classrooms had numbers on the seats, and they've mapped the classrooms so that faculty can either do up-seating arrangements if they want, or they can just make students write their seat number on their exam. So it's just a way to help them figure out who's who. And then make available technological solutions to help them. We talked about Turnitin. There's other ones as well. We also like to celebrate and educate academic integrity. So it's not just about misconduct, but it's about academic integrity. So every year, this is our 4th year, we have an academic integrity contest, a What's Your Reason contest. And we put it out there for students. And it's similar to the plagiarism contest that APFE did 2 years ago. You've done twice now, I think. Yeah. So we do one every year. This year, the grand prize is a reserved parking spot. So I'm hoping that will get us lots of entries. And we do a face-to-face with Academic Integrity Week, and we do an Academic Integrity Awards ceremony. And at this ceremony, we have our Executive Vice Chancellor present. We have a teaching staff give a talk that's supposed to encourage teaching staff. Usually we have students talk to students, and we give out awards. So we have a faculty award, a student award, and an Academic Integrity Ally Award. And that goes to a unit or a person or a student org that did something for academic integrity even though it's not in their job description. Yeah, so the folks that helped us with labeling the classroom seats and doing the classroom maps, they got the Ally Award last year. The year before that was the libraries because they do some plagiarism citation consultations and citation workshops. So those were our Ally Awards. And faculty, it's usually just a faculty member who's done a really good job with academic integrity in their classroom, in their syllabus. They talk about it. They maybe teach it. Last year, the person that got it is a lecturer in structural engineering. And she not only had an academic integrity policy for her class, but she does a whole lecture on it. And she has a reader on connecting academic integrity to engineering integrity. She's also on our academic integrity review board, so she got a... There's a couple on our website. Last year, we don't have that one up on our website because it was actually kind of embarrassing how bad they were. We didn't have a good prize last year. And they were all these weird computer programs that we can't actually run. We had to run them on one of my students' computers. But the previous 2 years were both drawings, actually. They were, actually, it's not difficult for me to go on there. Oh, it is. I'm sorry, isn't it? You don't want me to probably do this. They were drawings. So one year, she drew an eye that looked like it was looking in a mirror, and then there was her in the center of the eye. So, I have to look at myself in the mirror kind of thing. So that was good. Maybe I'll just describe that to you, but you can see them on our website. We're hoping with the bigger prize that we're going to get a bigger thing, like a video of some sort, but we'll see. I put my clicker down. Key thing for us is leveraging the moment for learning. And I think this is really changing the culture on our campus. How do we do that? Well, we have an academic integrity seminar, which I'm going to talk to you about the most. And then we do have 3 responses if it's more of a writing issue and less of an integrity issue. So the first one, collaboration, is really teaching students about how do you honestly collaborate with other people. The second one is really about that, what it says, managing the research and writing process. So many students don't cite because they did a poor job of keeping track of their research while they were doing it, right? They went and read something and didn't write it down right away. So it's helping them manage that research and writing process. And then a strategies and tools to avoid plagiarism is just really a different way of saying how do you technically cite, How do you do that, and why do you do that? If they have more intense writing issues, literacy issues, we send them to the writing center. So we don't coordinate a specific workshop on that because we figure that's more long term and can't be addressed in a 2-hour seminar. So the academic integrity seminar, this is what we are kind of our motto. It's not about what you did, it's about what you learned from it. And so we have a philosophy in our office that 98%, I think that number is dropping a bit, it might be more like 95% now, of the students reported to our office for breaches are not cheaters. They're good kids who made a bad decision under stress and pressure, or they made an ignorant decision, right? They didn't know. It was about not knowing. And so we don't focus so much on, oh, you did that, you should be ashamed, stand up and tell the class what you did, kind of thing. We don't do that at all. It's really about what you learn from it. It's our 5th year offering it. We developed it to replace an ethics workshop that was ineffective. The ethics workshop was run by the Student Conduct Office, and you got assigned to take it whether you stole a book from the bookstore, you plagiarized an essay, you were too noisy in residence halls. So it was just this weird mixture of people, and they weren't getting quite the message about the importance of academic integrity or the relationship of academic to professional integrity. It is part of a larger movement to change the culture, and I'll tell you a bit about how we think it's doing that. And the purpose is to provide a structured opportunity for students to learn. We really feel like, and research and theory tells us that people do learn. You talked about experiential learning. People do learn from experiences very well. And they can learn from bad experiences, but only if they're kind of forced to, because otherwise we like to pretend that the bad experience never happened. And students do pay $75 to take it. And if they fail it, they pay $75 to try again. And the only reason they would fail is if they don't show up, and that happens more often than you would like to think. And we keep changing things to try and make this less of an issue, because I think, well, if I was assigned this as a penalty, I'm going to make sure I show up because I don't want to get in trouble again. But that's an authority-driven person. So then we're trying to appeal to all the other types of people, and we haven't quite figured it out where we get 100% of kids following through.
So these are students who have gone through the policy and admitted that they...
Or were held responsible by the review board. Yeah. And those are a bit more difficult to deal with, those kids. But you'll see that the seminar is actually quite well received. So the seminar is based on Kolb's, and I forgot the citation, but I'm saying it orally for the video camera. Kolb's experiential learning cycle. First there's the experience, which is the violation. Then we do get them to engage in some reflection. It's a personal reflection that only the instructor and their peer educator read, so it's not shared with the rest of the students. And I'll show you what it is. Then we do some abstract conceptualization, right? So, okay, that's what this meant, and now let's broaden it out to generalize it to what it might mean in other areas. And then we get them to experiment with that learning as well. And we think that this is a part of changing their norms, values, and behaviors, which will change the culture. I'm not going to read these to you, but these are our learning objectives, and really we focus on academic integrity writ large and getting them to really see themselves in that context and see how they might, there might be a gap between themselves in that context and how they might close that gap. So it's our format. So there's the policy violation, and then I forgot to put on here, there's a pre and post assessment. We do a pre-assessment right before they start, a post right after, and then we do a post 6 months later as well. And so the first one is that telling your story assignment where they reflect. They have to actually verbalize on paper what happened. And we challenge students on that a little bit. So if they say, well, it's not my fault. If the TA had just talked to me before the TA told the professor, then I would, this never would have happened. So they're still focused on the issue of getting caught, not so much the issue of what happened. They have a one-on-one meeting with the peer educator. Then the first class meeting is almost all of it is focused on what we call academic integrity theater. It's a freeze frame interactive theater where we try and get at the culture of education, but specifically the culture of UCSD and the culture of students. Study group, like that example I gave earlier when I sat down with this table at the study group. We do a scene with that, and we do scenes with between instructors and between students and instructors and between students. Because there's a disconnect, right? Students don't seem to understand the bigger picture. Like the fact that they chose a research university, and the fact that the faculty don't get rewarded for teaching. And so we give them students that context. When they say, but it's not fair because he didn't do this, it's like, yeah, and so here's the broader context, and this is why we are saying it's a systemic problem, why there's a whole bunch of forces shaping this from all levels of the system. And we do this to try and empower the students, not to take away their responsibility, but to let them know, there's a lot of responsibility in this, and we all have a part to play in it. And that goes over really well. Then they have to do an assignment in between the 2 class meetings. They have to draft a case of a current ethical dilemma that they're going through. It doesn't have to be an academic one. It could be a personal one with a roommate or with a family, or we're starting to get some where they talk about illegal stuff. So we're trying to decide how to handle that. They have a one-on-one meeting with their peer who will go over that case with them, give them advice about how to go deeper, and then they submit a final version of it. We have a second class meeting where we actually take them through the ethical decision-making steps, a model that we've generated from research, and they practice going through that. And then their final assignments are they reaffirm this ethical decision-making steps with this case, their plan for how to uphold academic integrity. And really what we see a lot of is students, again, like I said, making bad decisions under stress and pressure. A student who, for example, so we give them questions. What are you going to do the next time your friend asks you for your paper? What are you going to do the next time you see someone cheating in a class? What are you going to do the next time you run out of time on an assignment? Because most of the time our students are purposefully engaging in these acts under stress and pressure at the last moment. It's not, it's not that conscious at the time, but in reflection, that's what they see they're doing. And then the application essay. The majority of our students go on to postgraduate school, law schools, medical schools, graduate schools, dentistry, pharmacy, and they have to, on some of those applications to graduate school, and I know this might be a little different here, they have to disclose whether they've ever been disciplined by their college. And so we're giving them practice to talk about that on their application essay. And we give them feedback. And that helps them move on because that's the thing they're most scared about. So, sorry it's sideways, but that's the only way I could fit it on. This is just our, customer satisfaction type of evaluation. This is not from our assessment. And considering that students are sanctioned to take this, the ratings are pretty good. A 1 is strongly disagree with the statement, and a 5 is strongly agree. And all of our ratings are above a 4. The lowest one is the assignments promote our learning, only got 4.07, but that was actually before we just changed them all. So we just changed a lot of them because of this rating. But overall, you see the actual full sentence says, overall, I feel this seminar is beneficial for students to take, and that almost gets a 4.5 out of 5 average. And a lot of students say, all students should have to take this. They should have to take this in their first year as part of that socialization thing. I actually don't think it would work, this particular seminar, because we have it built around the experience of being caught, really, so much. Almost every student has the experience of cheating, but it's not, or plagiarizing, but it wouldn't register the same way. But I appreciate the comments. So here's some things that they've said. Those are kind of summarizing what I just showed you. But I think it's really important. I like how the seminar didn't have a punishment feel to it. We were treated with respect and fairness, 2 of the values of academic integrity. It was almost enjoyable to be here. I love how they added the almost piece. I found it interesting. It should be mandatory. I found this seminar helpful in promoting my knowledge of academic integrity and really appreciated the non-intimidating environment. We're quite proud of that. So how do we think it changes culture? Well, it presents cheating as a systemic issue, which actually empowers students. Again, because if they feel like they're just being blamed for it, they leave there feeling like they're horrible people. Whereas they feel empowered when they leave our seminar to do something and say something. So and part of that reason is because it breaks the silence on the issue. Students now feel like, I can talk about this with my friends. I can maybe let somebody know. Maybe I'll let Tricia know if I see somebody cheating in a class next time. It equips them with skills and strategies they can use in the future. So not only will they use those skills about, say, maybe no, I'm sorry, Helena, I love you, but I'm not going to give you my paper kind of skill, which is a really hard skill for a lot of students to have. It's not only they'll use it, but then maybe Helena will say, oh, maybe I should do that too. And so that can spread. And what we found is the seminar graduates become integrity advocates. They stop their friends from cheating, they report cheatings when they see it, and frankly, some of them become volunteers in our office, or they become members of our student org, which I'll talk to you a bit about. But about half of our peer educators, our volunteers, are kids that have gone through the process. And I told you, the Zarina, one of our long-standing ones, went through the process. And I think I should wait to do questions when the videotape's not going. So peer-to-peer, changing student norms we think is really important. And this is from an article on using student norms to create positive learning environments. Norms embraced by student groups influence the behavior of their members, which in turn affects the learning experience of college students. For a long time, I hesitated focusing on students because my experience in the United States was the schools were treating this as came out of my dissertation research. The schools were treating this as a students behaving badly issue, especially the honor code schools, and they were saying, it's a student problem, let the students fix it, which ignores the systemic nature of the problem, of the forces coming from society and the education system and the organization that impact the problem. So I resisted that, but now as a practitioner, and now as I think more broadly about it, more encompassing about it, it really is, in terms of actions, the teaching staff and the students that are critical to shaping the culture, and then the institution's job is to support. And what I say is create a healthy, ethical environment that supports their behaviors. But really, if students are cheating and plagiarizing and teaching staff aren't doing anything about it, there's nothing much else we can do. So the norms that student groups have are really important. So our peer educators are volunteers. They advise and teach students as well as spread the word about academic integrity. I mentioned in seminar, they meet with them in group sessions, individualized meetings, but they also will advise students who are going through the process. And usually when they're advising students who are going through the process, it's not about, they're not the advocates for the student. There's another group for that. It's more of just a shoulder to cry on. The person that's going to tell them, you know what, you'll survive. Everything will be all right. Here's what happens. You may be facing a sanction that will be hard to deal with, but life will go on. You'll be okay, kind of thing. And that piece is very, very important. And they can do that so much better than I can do that. Right? Because students are to say, well, of course you're going to say that. Of course, you have to say that. But they feel like the peer educators are being more authentic with them. We also have AIM, which is a student organization, Academic Integrity Matters. And that started, I think, in 2009. And they really are the ones that run the contest, the educational campaign, the AI awards ceremony. They do the massive outreach to students where we do the more focused education. And we thought this was so important, and I thought that this was such a good idea for all of those schools like ours that was never going to be an honor code school and didn't want to be an honor code school because that's really like a southern east United States thing that nobody else gets, including me. But we all needed a way to get students involved, and so we created the International Academic Integrity Matters Student Organization. We've now got 3 chapters, UCSD and Bentley University and Missouri State University, and somebody here in Australia could be the first international chapter. But we're really trying to find a way, and I was going to talk about this with the academic integrity group here at Macquarie later in our interactive session. We have to find a way to have a space for students to become involved. And this is one suggestion of a way that they could become involved.